fish we fry, their DNA is now at our command. The genes we want can now be moved, the food we eat can be improved by adding traits that nature never planned. This power's now the subject of dispute. Are we biting into new forbidden fruit? Cracking the code, genetic mysteries to unfold. Cracking the code, genetic secrets will be told. Cracking the code.
If the safety and effectiveness of the current GM crops are no longer in doubt, then why are they under such fierce attack by their critics? There seem to be a number of factors at play beyond the realm of science. And it is these non-scientific issues that are the subject of this episode. These factors can be grouped into three broad categories, the first of which falls under the heading of political. To begin with, there is a fear that this new technology gives too much economic power to the handful of large multinational corporations that own it at the expense of the individual farmer to whom it is sold.
Why are we growing GE crops when the only people who are benefiting are large multinational corporations like Monsanto?
I think there is some truth to this perception that, yeah, the big corporations are in control of the technology. That's fairly obvious because it does take a lot of money to research and do the technology and develop the technology. So obviously it's going to be larger players that are involved with that. Is this unique with biotech? No, it is not.
The corporatization of the food system has been there for a long time. That doesn't justify it, but it can't be used as something that is synonymous with GMOs.
In some ways, it's like the information industry and the automobile industry and other industries where there's continued consolidation of the established systems and then new growth through new small companies at the cutting edge.
In the meantime, it's true that GM seeds are more expensive to farmers than the older conventional ones.
Today we buy the seed at a fairly elevated price, and then we pay a technical use agreement, which is $15 an acre for every acre of canola seed.
In addition, GM seeds are covered by patent, so farmers must repurchase them each year. They cannot save the seeds they grow themselves for planting the following season.
But farmers are used to this. They know what it's like to buy seeds every year. When they buy hybrid corn, for example.
Hybrid corn has been around since before World War II. And the hybrid seed has gladly been purchased by the farmers, and you can't propagate your hybrid seed.
Hybrid corn is the result of a still mysterious genetic phenomenon known as hybrid vigor. When pollen from one purebred or homozygous corn plant is sprinkled on the silk or female sex organ of a genetically different purebred, the resulting hybrid or heterozygous seeds produce uniform plants that are superior to both parents. Because of Mendel's second law of genetics, the next generation of seeds are highly variable, so farmers must repurchase more of the original hybrid seeds each year. Since its introduction in the 1930s, hybrid corn has replaced the older, open-pollinated varieties.
And it was a great benefit. I mean, it was at the heart of one of the major biological improvements in food production of the last century.
Once again, agriculture is being transformed by a new crop technology. In spite of their higher costs, farmers have switched to GM seeds more rapidly than they have to any previous technological change.
And the majority of farmers who sign the technology use agreement continue to sign it year after year. They go back to it.
But are farmers switching to GM seeds out of choice or out of necessity? Another fear is that the multinationals are removing the alternative conventional seeds from the marketplace.
The choice to me as a horticultural producer is getting wider and wider rather than narrower and narrower. And I hear that from my friends and neighbors that are in field crops. If they want to grow a genetically engineered crop, there's a growing choice. If they don't, there's still a growing choice of alternatives.
A lot of farmers are being had by, very aggressive marketing and very aggressive legal strategies that force them to accept the technology.
That's an insult to farmers. Farmers are working close to the bottom line all the time. They're making these decisions quite consciously, and they make those decisions because they feel they will benefit their bottom line. They're not blindly going to go out and buy something knowing that, oh, well, last year it didn't do very well, but I'll go back and get it again next year.
Among their critics, there is also the suspicion that the large multinationals are exploiting consumers as well as farmers.
Of course, they're knowingly foisting dangerous products on the public. It's what they've always done.
Do you think it's in their benefit, in their long-term interest, to produce a food source, a food product, which is harmful? I don't think so.
It is definitely in the company's interest to make sure that the products are safe, because especially in litigious North American society, people will sue you in the courts and claim that your product made them sick. So you better have all the scientific evidence on your side, because you're still going to have to defend yourself anyway.
The resistance to GM crops and foods is centered in Europe, where in the 1990s, the meat supply, particularly in the UK, was contaminated by so-called mad cow disease.
There is some connection in the minds of various European consumers that genetically modified foods are similar technology or gave rise to mad cow disease. This is not true, but trying to dispel that myth is very difficult.
Mad cow disease obviously related to the food supply, and there were examples, I think, of scientists not doing their job, of government regulators not doing their job, and that's really what prompted much of the European hysteria.
What the government did was try to persuade everyone that there was no problem. In fact, the agriculture minister was famously on television once feeding a beef burger to his child to try to persuade everyone that this was a good thing to do.
And then when it turned out that there really was a reason to be concerned about it, of course, the minister looked entirely untrustworthy, and the whole system appeared untrustworthy. So the loss of confidence in the whole regulatory system then transferred to the loss of confidence in the ability to regulate genetically modified foods, and that's why Europeans are not ready to accept genetically modified foods.
European fears about GM foods have also been aroused by high-profile scare campaigns run by environmental groups such as Greenpeace.
People generally had no basis for assessing the reality or the truth behind the charges. And because it was plausible, it was the reaction, the natural reaction is to say, whoa, wait a minute, let's look into this a little further. And in doing that, you turn to the accuser and you say, tell me more. And they frighten the daylights out of people intentionally. That's a strategy. And they succeeded.
Those that are criticizing it are making a living criticizing the technology in many cases, and that has to be taken into consideration. I think it does raise similar type concerns about their objectivity as we should rightly have about Monsanto and the farmers themselves.
A second broad category of non-scientific factors falls under the heading of the psychology of risk, how we perceive risk and how we decide whether a risk is acceptable or not. These factors help explain why the same people who embrace very risky activities may take fright and reject the much smaller risk presented by the current GM crops and foods.
That's why we'll do very risky things like ski or skydive or smoke cigarettes, but we are very resistant to risks that are extremely low if we feel somebody else is imposing them on us against our will. So what makes the risk acceptable is not how big it is, but whether I'm